While the official opposition's future hangs in the balance, this hour voting for the incoming DA leadership opens. At 6, 2,000 voting delegates will select the party's new captains, notably its leader, incumbent John Steenhuisen, and former Johannesburg Mayor Dr. Mpho Phalatse lobbied for votes on Saturday. Today is day 2 of the party's Federal Congress, the largest in the DA's 23-year history. The party claims it's also the most important event in South African politics ahead of the 2024 national polls. Now, our reporter Erin Bates is there, joins us live from the Gallagher Convention Centre. Good to see you, Erin, bright and early. Now, we know that the DA's future will be decided over the next 3 hours. How will delegates be voting?
Yes, Ntokozo, the sun rising here in Midrand on what is going to be the future leadership of the DA. And the question is how much of that leadership will be known or current, and how much of it will be unknown or fresh into the role and future looking. So voting has kicked off this hour. It runs between 6 and 9 and will take place online. The DA has used this online voting system before, but Dr. Mpho Phalatse yesterday raising some concerns about it, relaying the sentiment of some of those 2,000 delegates here, the largest contingent we understand in the DA's history. Her saying that there needs to be a lot of rigor really to ensure that the online voting system is properly managed and run, and this prompted some response from the official within the DA responsible for overseeing the voting in this critical Congress for the opposition party, insisting that because it is digital, it has been used before, and it is overseen by an independent third party, that there's no room for error. But of course, this all really boils down to, in the big scheme of things, the leadership race between Phalatse and incumbent John Steenhuisen. They were punting for their roles in yesterday's sitting here at Gallagher Convention Centre. Let's just reflect on 2 pullouts, you could say, from each of their speeches to those delegates.
As the leader of the DA, I'm making 7 pledges to our delegates, and they are getting the ANC under 50% nationally, focusing our communication on issues that matter to voters, ending load shedding, reducing unemployment below 20%, defeating cadre deployment and building a capable state, halving violent crime and devolving more power to provincial and local government. But Democrats, to bring any of our solutions to bear in time to save South Africa, it's time now for the DA to ascend to national government and provincial government around the country.
Delegates, it is time. Our time has come. But it is now or never. South Africa is on the verge of total collapse. South Africans are now looking for an alternative. The ANC will drop below 40% in the upcoming elections, and the DA must be ready. We've cultivated a brand of good governance, and South Africans agree that where we govern better.
Now, Ntokozo, one of the delegates I spoke to making their way into this venue this morning was saying that she'd received an SMS just after 5 this morning that contained the unique code she needs to use and the link to the online voting service. And it was Greg Crumbrock of the DA, the party's chief electoral officer, who said with regard to this online voting system being used to determine the new top brass, the coterie of leaders who are going to take the DA to the national polls in 2024. He said the system said about the system the following: the possibility of human error on a manual system when you have to capture 21,050 entries, because that's the number of entries that we will have. You take into account all the elections we have exists. With manual counting to capture and count all of that, human error will creep in, and tiredness following many hours of that. However, with the electronic voting and counting systems, this will be done literally in seconds. And so him there vouching for the online voting system those 2,000 DA delegates will be using over the next 3 hours in order to elect and determine the makeup of the DA leadership moving forward.
Right. Well, speeches yesterday, Erin, showed that the party has this unwavering eye on the 2024 general elections, almost like a laser focus on growing that voter base. Leadership in this particular moment clearly matters.
It certainly does, and we saw that from the slew or range of speakers that we had yesterday, from DA mayors from around the country to those in the national structures of the party. Quite an aggressive stance from some. In fact, you and our viewers may have seen that mashup of news clips with very dramatic music, quite aggressive and sort of rapid cuts or edits, mention of sort of doomsday in South Africa. Dr. Palatse touched on that in her speech, punting or lobbying for votes from those on the floor here. And certainly that is what the DA is looking ahead to. The party has touted this Congress as a make or break moment for the country because it considers itself the only viable option for voters who are fed up with the ANC going into next year's elections. Now, the DA is a self-proclaimed official opposition. Of course, we have a vibrant range of opposition parties in South Africa, but there are some issues with the party in terms of its performance up to date, and that's certainly something political analysts have commented on. Let's have a listen to what Wayne Sussman had to say.
What's going to be interesting in this leadership race is that on Sunday afternoon, of course, people will be focused on the leader, whether it's Steenhuisen or Palatse. I expect it to be Steenhuisen. But also, just like with the ANC's now top 7, is the federal executive. Someone like Ivan Meyer, who I'm sure is going to be the re-elected. Helen Zille, I expect to be re-elected. But for the deputy federal chairperson positions, can the Democratic Alliance put across a diverse group of people which are better reflect the demographics of South Africa in 2023 than they have going into this Congress? That's going to be something interesting for me to observe, because that would be a chance for the DA to say, look, we are a party which can represent the hopes and aspirations of all South Africans, not just a select few. That's going to be absolutely key for them.
Yeah, interesting insights there from Sussman. But Erin, while those delegates out in Midrand are energized, are enthusiastic about the potential leadership to come out of this Congress, some are skeptical about the DA's capacity to actually grow that voter support.
Certainly, and there are these sort of contrasting tensions or sort of pulls on the DA in terms of its existing voter base, its established support in places like the Western Cape, for example, and growing its numbers. If you look around or looked around yesterday, let's say, in the hall, there was a vibrancy. You see the fabric of South Africa in many ways, and it seems as though delegates were encouraged to also kind of put on their best, their Saturday and Sunday best, for the conference. But the question is, who's pulling the levers of power in the party and how transformed those structures are, not only in terms of the individuals, but the way in which decision-making happens. Of course, with all of what's going on here at the Congress, political analysts and those who are trying to weigh up their decisions ahead of the national election vote next year are putting their own beady eye on proceedings. And here's some commentary from Sussman again and political analyst Richard Calland on what they're seeing so far.
If I look at what by-election results are saying now, and if I look at the 2021 local government elections where Action SA debuted, amongst all those groups, the Democratic Alliance has particular challenges. So what they want to show at this Congress is, yes, there were challenges in the party, yes, there were missteps in the party, but the party is now united, and the party is still the official opposition, and the party is the best vehicle to bring the ANC under 50%. It's one thing being able to control the narrative at a Congress. It's another thing being able to prove that in by-elections, and it's even going to be harder to do that in the 2024 elections.
My column, I think what's wrong is that they don't have a clear strategy, political strategy. It seems to me that they are caught between those two positions. On the one hand, trying to solidify their base and serving their base, minority voters. On the other hand, trying to grow their support with the majority support. I don't think it's just about race. I don't think it's just the skin color of the leader. I think it's the brand and the messaging and the ethos and values that that leader or set of leaders conveys. And I think perhaps on that level they will struggle.
Interesting insights again there from Richard Calland. Now, Erin, I understand that you have one electoral official there with you. What can they tell us about the voting system today?
Well, let's find out. Dr. Mili Gondwe, she's an MP in Parliament wading through the Section 194 inquiry, and poof, what a drama that's been. But you're here in your capacity as a presiding officer for the DA at this Congress. Tell us about the voting process currently underway.
Thank you so much for having me on Newzroom Afrika, Erin. We just opened voting, and that's why I was late for our interview. Voting opened at 6, so delegates can vote between 6 and 9 this morning. What happened a little after 5 this morning was that all delegates were sent a link and a unique voting code, to use for voting. Yeah.
And have you cast your own vote? How was that process for you if you did?
I haven't, but my other two presiding officers have, and it was seamless according to them. And we're not expecting major, technical glitches when it comes to candidates getting the voting link, as well as the voting code.
Now, you've spoken about expecting things to go smoothly. Dr. Palatse raised some concerns about the methodology used here. Were you disappointed to hear one of your runners for leader doubting the very system your party is choosing to use in this Congress?
No, not at all. We pride ourselves on having really strong internal, internal processes, democratic processes. So we encourage, our delegates and our candidates alike to raise issues, and we will address those concerns. And she did raise concerns around the voting system, which is called the OPA voting system. It's an online voting system. I think for the past 2 years now, we've used it in close to 50 internal elections, including provincial congresses, regional congresses, and internal caucus elections. So it's a very secure online voting system. Once the delegates get a code, they can't use that code more than once. The code is unique to that particular delegate, and it can't, we can't really track what, who a delegate has voted for on the basis of the code. So it's quite secure, and it's widely used across the world. So we're quite happy with the online voting system, and as I explained, we've been using it for the past 2 years.
So you're one of the presiding officers. I wanted to ask, I know you have a closed session on finance today. Who is responsible for overseeing the budget for this Congress? Will you be disclosing the numbers involved? How much has it cost the DA to put this whole show on?
I think you've correctly stated that it's a closed session, so I'm not at liberty to discuss what will be discussed there and who will be doing what. Please allow me not to answer that question.
Because I do think it's an important point. The DA yesterday and several of those speeches we had was driving home the issue of corruption, and you're pitching yourself as a party who represents the opposite of corrupt government officials, corrupt governance. Isn't it important to be transparent on the money behind this, whether you're certain that it's all clean funds and where it comes from?
I want to assure you that it's all clean money. And we are going to be transparent, but transparent with our delegates. And it was a decision that was taken by the party, and I think we should respect it.
That's a very clear sort of line in the sand, and you're not going to give me a quantum on the actual figure for how much you've cost. How many million? Come on, give us an idea.
Nice try, Erin. No, I'm not going to give you a figure.
Well, that's quite a startling rejection there. But just before we let you go, let's move on to what's happening in the Section 194 inquiry. You're going back into that fray come Monday. You've also, at this conference, touched on the role of the DA in Parliament. You have an eye to being a government ruling in the union buildings. That's clear through coalitions. How will that shift be if indeed it does happen?
Erin, I'm here in my capacity as a presiding officer, so I can't answer any questions that have nothing to do with the Congress today. But yes, I am part of the Section 194 committee, and I'm looking forward to going back and doing my work there as a member of that committee. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Gondwe. I think that's enough rejection on national TV for me for one morning, Ntokozo. But there you have it. We will see if we can get those figures behind this Congress of the DA. Of course, it's a historic one for the opposition party, and we'll have those results later today, set to be announced at 2:30.
All right, tight-lipped indeed, Erin, but thank you so much for that information coming live to us there from the Gallagher Convention Centre.
Power not to the government, power to the people.
I have decided to make myself available for the position of federal leader at the upcoming Federal Congress.